Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG Show for Friday, May the 5th, 2022. And first up is Disinfogeddon. There is an organized campaign. Let's see who's involved. Well, we've got the media, and we've got the government, and we've got the deep state, all working together to not only eliminate free speech, but also to cast anyone at variance with the government or the progressives as illegitimate, as people who are extremist, not worthy to be heard, not worthy to be political opposition. We see it in the United States with President Biden talking about MAGA as the most extreme organization that's ever existed in the United States, which is obvious idiocy, but you get the point. Let's go to the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, which of course is owned by the government and financed by the government, and now is just full out government CSIS Liberal Party propaganda. Here's a story from Elizabeth Thompson, as noted previously, a reliable foot soldier in the war against liberty. Online content creators are making money from hate, misinformation, MPs told. B'nai B'rith says there has been an explosion of hate online. And there's a picture, anti-mask protesters, one holding a QAnon sign, meet in Calgary on September the 27th, 2020. It begins. Creators of hateful content and misinformation are making millions of dollars through social media. The head of an international nonprofit group told MPs studying ideologically motivated violent extremism Thursday. Imran Ahmed is the chief executive officer of the Center for Countering Digital Hate, which has been tracking online hate for the past 6 years. He told members of the House of Commons Public Safety and National Security Committee that a profitable online economy has emerged around hate and misinformation. There are commercial hate and disinformation actors who are making a lot of money from spreading discord and peddling lies, Ahmed said. There's a web of commercial actors, from platforms to payment processors to people who provide advertising technology that is embedded on hateful content, giving the authors of that hateful content money for every eyeball they can attract to it, that benefit from hate and misinformation. How many times does this Ahmed fellow use the words hate and use that phrase, hate and misinformation, every day? He continues, it's got revenues in the millions, the high millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. That has made some entrepreneurs in this space extremely wealthy. Where did Ahmed get these figures, particularly hundreds of millions of dollars? He pulled them out of his, well, let's just say he made them up. Online platforms and search engines benefit commercially from this system, Ahmed said. Fringe actors, from anti-vaxxers to misogynist incels, to racists such as white supremacists and jihadists, are able to easily exploit the digital platforms who promote their content. Ahmed said that while a small number of highly motivated, talented spreaders of misinformation are able to do a lot of damage, social media companies are doing little to stop them or to enforce their own platform rules. What we have seen is piecemeal enforcement, even when there are identifiable super spreaders of harm. Oh, you see? People who disagree with the government are diseased. They're super spreaders, who are, of course, not just super spreaders of harm, they're super violators of their own community standards. And it just goes to show they're more addicted to the profits that come with attention than they are to doing the right thing. Of course, Ahmed works for free because he's a selfless, a disinterested individual. Ahmed said his group did a study of Instagram and documented how its algorithms were driving people deeper into conspiracy theories. It showed that if you follow wellness, the algorithm was feeding you anti-vax content. If you follow anti-vax content, it was feeding you anti-Semitic content and QAnon content. It shows that some people are vulnerable to misinformation and conspiracy theories. Ahmed recommended several changes, such as design changes to online platforms, more transparency on algorithms used by social media companies, and measures to hold companies and their executives accountable. He also defended social media companies that kick those promoting hate or misinformation off their platforms. Of course, Imran Ahmed is the sole judge of what constitutes hate or misinformation throughout the universe unto perpetuity. Deplatforming these people and putting them into their own little hole. A little hole. Is this guy a teenager? A little hole of anti-Semites, anti-vaxxers, and general lunatics is a good thing, because actually you limit their ability to, here we go again, infect other people. But also for trends such as convergence and hybridization of ideologies. Username available, hybridization of ideologies. But some other witnesses warned that if extremists are kicked off large social media platforms, they will just move on to other platforms where there is less moderation. Garth Davies, Associate Director of the Institute on Violence, Terrorism, and Security at Simon Fraser University, said deplatforming fuels support for far-right groups. If we look at it from the perspective of the extreme right, all of these attempts essentially feed their narrative. Golly, I wonder why that might be. We are essentially providing with the fuel that they need. Every attempt to try to deplatform or to identify content that needs to be shut down actually allows them to say, see, look, they're afraid of us. They don't want these ideas out there. Where is the lie, Professor Davies? Davies said far-right supporters consider groups like Black Lives Matter to be extremist. Oh, no. And have called for those groups to be deplatformed. Black Lives Matter doesn't like to talk about this anymore, since we're all talking about how rich they got and how many houses they bought. But it was formed by three people, and two of them are non-binary folk who have a relationship with each other. And initially they announced, you can find this easily enough, that one of their goals was to destroy marriage. Davies said the government isn't doing enough to monitor extremism in Canada, hasn't devoted enough resources to it, and lacks tools like a central database to track extremists. Appearing before the committee, Tony McAleer, a former extremist and co-founder of the group Life After Hate, called for a nuanced approach and more training for people like school counselors who can help keep young people from gravitating to extremist groups. And I'll have more on Tony McAleer a little later. Marvin Rotrand, National Director of B'nai B'rith Canada's League for Human Rights, said there has been less in-person harassment during the pandemic, but a spike in online hate. Online hate has exploded. Rotrand told MPs, said his organization tracked 2,799 online incidents in 2021. Is that a lot in a country of 38 million people? And exactly, what is an online hate incident? Rotrand called on the Liberal government to fulfill its election promise to hold social media platforms accountable for the content they host, and argued the government should update its anti-racism strategy to better define hate. Yes, that would be a good idea. Better defining what hate means. So who is this Tony McAleer fellow? Let's see. According to Everybody Wiki, he was born August 30th, 1967, as a Canadian activist who co-founded the peace advocacy group Life After Hate. After spending 15 years with the White Aryan Resistance Movement in Vancouver, as part of the neo-Nazi movement, he was a co-founder of the Aryan Resistance Movement in Canada and launched Canadian Liberty Net, a telephone message service, networking service for his resistance organizations. Canadian Liberty Net was eventually shut down by the Canadian Human Rights Commission and the Canadian Supreme Court. McAleer was born in England and was raised in Vancouver. He returned to England in 1982, where he attended an all-Methodist boarding school in Scarborough. McAleer would soon connect with the skinhead punk scene back in Vancouver, eventually discovering racist punk bands. Well, I was living in Vancouver at the time, and I was very well connected with the punk scene in Vancouver. And if there were any racist punk bands, I never heard of them. They certainly didn't play any dates. The punk scene in Vancouver was ferociously left-wing. Yes. In 1994, McAleer was a defendant before the Canadian Human Rights Commission over his operation of a computerized telephone answering service. He was convicted, appealed the conviction all the way to the Canadian Supreme Court, but lost. Yes, he became disillusioned with the movement. He would later cite his daughter and son as motivating factors for his de-radicalization. He's currently chairman of the board of directors of Life After Hate. Yes, there is a whole host of these people, supposedly big wigs in the extreme right, neo-Nazism, whatever. And so many of them seem to end up working for such organizations. There seems to be a pipeline there. And is that a coincidence? There is a gushing profile of Tony McAleer by Jason Wilson of The Guardian in April 2017. Everything about this man's story, McAleer, stinks to high heaven. And if he glowed any harder, he would be visible from space. Tony McAleer has a word for people who have left violent extremist movements. He calls them formers. McAleer is a former himself. In the 1980s, he was deeply involved in the neo-Nazi group White Aryan Resistance and was involved in anti-immigrant activism, Holocaust denial, and street violence. Was he ever arrested for this street violence? In the 1990s, he attracted increasing notoriety through a series of publicity stunts and by running a white supremacist phone line. Yes, apparently white nationalists, neo-Nazis, were big on the ground in Vancouver, except that they never appeared on the streets. Never appeared on the streets. And for the past 20 years, he has undergone the long, sometimes painful process of leaving it all behind. And now he's making bank on it. So it doesn't seem like it was such a long, sometimes painful process. He sees the pathway from current to former as a difficult and lonely one, laden with snares. It is one that he and his colleagues at Life After Hate, all of whom are former extremists, try their best to help shepherd others along. The group, which is a virtual organization with a network of members throughout North America, collaborates on research into de-radicalization and runs a support network for those who, like them, have made the decision to leave violent extremism behind. Where's the evidence that this McAleer fellow was ever involved in any violent extremism? McAleer says, early on, formers have to spend time in a void where they don't have a social circle. That can feel worse than the dysfunction of the old group, and that's when people go back. He pauses and musters his customary wry grin. We try to fill that void. It's almost like a halfway house. It's one of the several moments in conversation where McAleer draws an analogy between the condition of formers and the process of recovery from addiction. As just in the case of the AA member who will always be an alcoholic, for McAleer, the past must be acknowledged, atoned for, and if possible, transcended. But for the formers, it seems, as for the alcoholic, it can never be forgotten. If there's one thing McAleer has retained in his journey from prominent racist to globe-trotting de-radicalizer, who pays for all this globe-trotting? The one thing, it's his charisma. Yeah, nothing suspicious about that. His warm brogue mixes northern England, where he was born, in Western Canada, where he grew up and still lives. He puts some mistakes down to a Celtic stubbornness inherited from his Liverpool Irish father, and he may have inherited some capacity from smooth talking from that side of the family too. His engaging stories issue from a broad, expressive face. Parts of his tales are grim, but a sense of humor is unfailing. If anyone could talk you round to something, it's him. Yeah, a Northern England Irish bullshit artist. In a busy coffee shop in downtown Vancouver, he explains how he was drawn into white power movements in the 1980s and how he has spent the past 20 years painstakingly trying to extricate himself from it, as well as make sense of what he did. Or perhaps he could have just moved from Vancouver to some other city in Canada. Took 20 years, did it? Citing research from the University of Maryland, he points out that the most common factor in the backgrounds of those who wind up in violent extremist movements is emotional trauma. It's a lousy predictor, he says, because clearly not everyone who experiences trauma becomes violent, but he thinks it still has some explanatory power. Although there was no violence in his childhood home, He says an absent father and turmoil between his parents left him angry and confused. I'm just about to burst into tears here. Apparently, his upbringing was not the best. Sorry, I'll gain control of myself. Get in the queue, pal. At a Christian Brothers school in Vancouver, teachers perplexed by his combination of disruptive behavior and obvious intelligence decided, quote, let's beat the grades into him, unquote. Is that what they said to him? Is that what they said to each other? In this, he went to a Catholic school. Oh, horror of horrors. In this school and others, he was subjected to bullying from teachers and students, but I thought he had the gift of the gab. Such experiences are common among current and former extremists, he says, and it explains a lot. Trauma leaves us with a belief system that forms part of our identity. I call it toxic shame. We pick up the belief that we aren't lovable enough, smart enough, that we're powerless and weak. We go into the world and we live our lives in reaction to that. Later, some of these people fall into extremist groups because they offer a sense of belonging, a sense of camaraderie, meaning, and significance. In other words, they get a sense of identity that is intertwined with the ideology, making each more difficult to dislodge. Excuse me. In high school, McAleer begged his parents to send him elsewhere. In 1982, he was packed off to Scarborough, England. He was a Catholic with an Irish name at an all-Methodist boarding school, so there was no respite from the bullying. But he did discover the burgeoning skinhead scene, which at the time at least was not necessarily racist. By 1982, yeah, it was. You had the oi bands, but I suppose this fellow, Jason Wilson, has never heard of the oi bands or knows nothing about punk rock. Why was he sent off to an all-Methodist boarding school in Scarborough, England? Why? And if it was an all-Methodist boarding school, why was this Irish Catholic admitted there? But never mind that. The next summer, he returned to Canada and went to his first punk show. Punk was dead by 1982. In the queue outside, he encountered two local skinheads who were sizing up his Doc Martens to steal them. Instead, he befriended them, and they became his closest allies over the next decade as he descended deeper into the white power movement. In their company that summer, he got into his first fight at the age of 16. It was electrifying. The adrenaline rush was intoxicating. As skinheads within the punk scene, we had notoriety and people were afraid of us. A false sense of power comes from that. There was no punk scene left in Vancouver by 1982. In 1984, he went back to England for a holiday and returned with an armful of Screwdriver records. The band's openly racist message, which arose in the maelstrom of the UK's oi scene, again contradicting what you've just written, Guardian writer, influenced him, and he passed that message on to his fellow travelers in Vancouver. How was he getting the money to transfer back and forth from Vancouver to England like that? That's when it started going from ultra-British stuff, drinking ale and football hooliganism, to something else. Throughout his career in the white power movement, there are careers, he says that the music was the main driving force in the recruitment of young people. I quickly became the one driving the ideology in my group. It started off as Canada First and immigration reform, and steadily it became more extreme. The more extreme the positions were, the more exciting and titillating it seemed. In the next half decade, he and others in the Aryan resistance movement, and how many people were ever in this movement? Like 7? Went from providing security for anti-immigration meetings and scuffles in punk clubs to forming links with white supremacists elsewhere and carrying out sophisticated media operations. McAleer attended the first youth congress at the infamous Idaho compound of the Aryan Nations group in 1987. He formed relationships with other Canadian white supremacists, such as Wolfgang Drüge, who was imprisoned for a plot to launch a coup in Dominica and was shot dead in 2005. Here the picture becomes clearer. Wolfgang Drüge was a major force in the Heritage Front, which was an organization which was funded and run by the government of Canada. And Wolfgang Drüge was almost certainly a government agent. Wolfgang Drüge was getting information from the Toronto Police Service. He was working as a repo man. Why would the Toronto Police Service give information about cars to a neo-Nazi? Because they were involved in this too? And the circumstances of Durga's death, supposedly as some sort of romantic quarrel, very, very suspicious. It seems like he was a government informant who had outlived his usefulness. McAleer designed some of the first white supremacist websites and wrote an article in 1995 for the Racist Resistance Records magazine, urging other white supremacists to take advantage of the new medium of the World Wide Web. There are no limits to free speech on the internet. Anything goes. One stunt in particular put him on the map in British Columbia, attracting the attention of mainstream media and anti-racists alike. In 1993, he allowed people to think he was bringing the U.S. founder of White Aryan Resistance, Tom Metzger, to speak in Vancouver. Oh, he allowed people to think this. Who was his control? Who was operating him? Metzger had been bankrupted in 1991 after civil action following the murder of an Ethiopian immigrant in Portland, Oregon by skinheads associated with his movement. The border was put on full alert when they heard Metzger might be visiting just 2 years later. Alan Dutton, the director of the Canadian Anti-Racism Education and Research Society, also lives in Vancouver. Dutton is a communist. This is not a controversial statement. Dutton was being funded by the provincial government of British Columbia for years and years and years. Back in 1993, he had McAleer in his sights. How very convenient. When he and other organizers heard about the plans to bring Metzger over, we organized a demonstration and brought about 3,000 people into downtown Vancouver. Around the same time, we also organized demonstrations against a band he managed called Odin's Law. So, I see. So, this fellow McAleer allows people to think that he's bringing a notorious neo-Nazi to Vancouver, but he isn't. And so as a result, Alan Dutton, who knows about McAleer and is on his radar, gets 3,000 people to demonstrate in downtown Vancouver against a phantom threat. McAleer's activities were just part of a broad upsurge at the time, which Dutton compares to the present ascendancy of the alt-right. Oh, you see, the alt-right, they're neo-Nazis. How very convenient. How very how would I say, useful this McAleer fellow is. The far right was really surging and growing rapidly from the mid-1980s to the late 1990s in Canada. This included White Aryan Resistance, the Heritage Front, and many branches and chapters of the KKK. Oh, the KKK, sure. And, of course, The Guardian, and Tony McAleer, doesn't bother to mention that the Heritage Front was, again, funded and led by the government of Canada. In the end, it turned out that McAleer had been foxing all along. Oh, what a foxy young man McAleer was. He had never planned to bring Metzger physically to Canada, he says, and only played a video of a Metzger speech followed by a telephone question and answer session. This kind of nose-thumbing was irresistible to McAleer. I got off on it. I was a complete narcissist, an attention whore. Yeah, it doesn't sound like you were serious about any of this, strangely enough. In 1994, he was before the Canadian Human Rights Commission over a computerized telephone answering service he ran called Canadian Liberty Net. At its peak, it was getting 300 calls a day. Life After Hate has identified some patterns in the way in which people detach themselves from violent extremist movements. For McAleer, it was his children who drove a wedge between him and his old life. Blah, blah, blah. A decade after his run-in with the Human Rights Commission and his slow drift away from his old milieu, he attended a self-development course related to his work as a financial planner. There he met Dov Baron, a speaker and leadership trainer who McAleer now credits as a mentor. The two bonded over their shared origins in the north of England and their love of Monty Python. A friend bought him a one-on-one session at Barron, where after some prodding, McAleer owned up to his past, and a smiling Barron said, "Tony, you realize I'm a Jew, right?" As if he didn't know. With a name like that, come on. At that stage, Barron says, "It was clear to me as we were talking about it that he's out of the movement. The movement is not out of him." He went through Barron's leadership and speaking program and began speaking publicly about his experience. By 2009, he connected with other members of his group, and they began producing Life After Hate as an online journal. In 2011, he and the other groups were invited to Dublin to participate in a Google Ideas Summit with others who had left violent extremism behind. So this professional or semi-professional meathead suddenly gets taken up by this Dove Baron fellow and by Google. I wonder why that might be. It was surreal. You had guys from the IRA, guys who had been in for murder, guys from the Ulster Volunteer Force. You had the former president of Colombia and FARC there at the same time. Red Brigades, Bader Meinhof, Mujahideen, Six Skinheads, the Bloods, the Crips, MS-13. Wow, sounds like a whale of a time. When the Life After Hate crew talked to people in and around the conference, they discovered that many people had stories similar to their own, irrespective of the details of the organizations they had become involved in. After the conference, the Life After Hate Network firmed up their mission. They now collaborate on research into hate groups. Who is paying for it? More importantly, they provide a support network for just about 40 people throughout North America who are in various stages of the journey away from violent extremism. McAleer's own journey has taken him around the world as a speaker. He and Barron even appeared in New York at an event organized by the U.S. State Department and the UN. But his priority now is building bridges closer to home. In Vancouver, he says his actions created fear. There are three communities here that I think were harmed most by what I did: the gay community, the Indo-Canadian community, and the Jewish community. Well, as I say, I was living in Vancouver that whole time. Neo-Nazi presence close to zero. And I have a very strong suspicion, based on what I know about the Heritage Front, which is a huge story I won't get into, that there were more feds than anyone else in all of these groups. Rather like the KKK since the 1970s, feds all the way down. Let's go to the chat. Hello to William Hicks, Benjamin K, Pomp Castle 88, Oscar Toe, Brian Frakes, Chogakin 666. You know that they leaked that memo to gin up shenanigans for the midterms. Hello to Mercurius Alicus, greetings from Australia, Saturday, 9 a.m., now 9:27 a.m. Hello to Vihu. Super Spreaders of Harm, good punk band name, says Mercurius Alicus. Indeed, Super Spreader. Hello to No Sleep Till Breezewood, PA. Glad to see you back. Hello to Ann Run. Chokin666 says a Blondie is touring the UK with Glenn Matlock and Johnny Marr. I met Glenn Matlock once back in the day. Sounds like fun. Debbie Harry's what, 76 years old now? Jan says disinformation, Fukushima. Chris Stein is too ill to tour, so I think one of those guys is filling in. Here, Northanger Abbey paused to catch up on the news with KMG, says Oscar. Well, thank you. Clem Burke in good form as always, says Chokin666. My Trail of Disgrace says hope they tour North America. And who else do we have? This is Supreme Paranoia. Who gives a damn if these guys are white nationalists? I don't, again, based on my experience and what I've seen in Vancouver, and what I know about how the government of Canada several times infiltrated the Reform Party. Peaceful organization, attempted to, let's get neo-Nazis or people pretending to be neo-Nazis up close to Preston Manning, okay? There were several levels of government involved in this. This is one of the greatest scandals in Canadian history, but for some reason, the Reform Party and Preston Manning didn't want to make too much of it. I suspect because it was put to him, don't make a fuss. And, we'll make it worth your while in various ways. We won't crush you. Oscar Toe says, did a nun make him write his name on the chalkboard? Angelic Epstarts were anti-fascist, says Chogokin666. There was that band in Vancouver. Someone will remember their name. One of their members, their bass player and chief ideologue, went to jail as one of the Squamish 5 terrorists, which is not really a story. Also, that, the extent to which this was, Antifa. These guys were Antifa adjacent, Burke Sultanov says it's actually okay to be white. Indeed, it is. Joken 666, talk about the effects of the airborne regiment Somali torture scandal. Well, briefly, Canada, like the United States, stupidly decided to intervene in Somalia. Apparently, people were starving, so they sent in soldiers with guns because that's what you do. What was his name? Jeff McNally, the late editorial cartoonist. He also had a humor cartoon which ran in hundreds of American newspapers called Shoe. It was about a newspaper office, and they were all birds, right? He had this great, I guess this would have been 1994, 1995, one of the greatest editorial cartoons I've ever seen. There was an African child on the ground, with the swollen stomach from starvation, and just a shrunken head, and there was a Marine with a fixed bayonet pointing at this black boy's skull, and he yelled, "Eat!" Yeah, that was about it. Anyway, the United States, the Rangers and the like, in their compounds, they put up warnings, in English and in the native language, saying anyone attempting to enter this compound will be shot on sight. Well, the Canadians didn't do that, and people were entering the compound. And for what reason? Anyway, some people were tortured by the Canadian paratroopers, and it turns out that those involved in the torture were Native Indian or Métis, but that's by the by. And as a result, the airborne regiment was disbanded, and we had a phony racism crisis in Canada. And Canada decided we need to bring as many Somalis to Canada as possible. How's that worked out? Not well. As previously mentioned, last time I was at Edmonton, walking downtown Edmonton at night, inside of buildings and outside of buildings, numerous Somali men leaning against walls, looking sullen and murderous. Who else do we have here? RR is WLP, whose group got leaked right after he died. Wait a minute, what do we have here? Something about the RCMP? RCMP just arrested teen on obviously trumped up terror charges for filling in form on the website of FedOp at Atom something. Canada's list of banned orgs is so comical. Ones that aren't feds barely exist in Canada. There was a guy on Twitter who he said that he was a member of, this Atom Waffen group. And, oh, yeah, you're, we agree with you about pretty much everything. So why don't you just, admit what your true feelings are about, the unconventional conservatism of Adolf Hitler. And he kept suggesting that we meet personally. I said, no, I'm not going to meet with this guy for all sorts of reasons, right up at the top being that this guy was pretty obviously a Fed. Again, for my trial of disgrace, judging from recent motions and bills in RCMP CSIS behavior, feds are pushing them to come up with results to support anti-white narrative, i.e. response to convoy, fabricating fake movement. Concept Country from a right-wing podcast. Berkin Sultanov says, old tactic, increase isolation and trust by infiltrating groups. I like that article, Kevin. It was amusing, says Oscar Toe. Hello to Rodion Raskolnikov. Yes, Heritage Front 2.0. And what else do we have? A ripping yard, KMG, says Brian Frakes. Hello to Earl Pipe. I've been taught my nuns the name on the chalkboard thing is a psy-op. I'm so tired of this. Is that Dennis Leary, that Irish-American comedian, talking about, the horrors of going to Catholic school and the nuns. This was in the 1970s. By 1970s, there were hardly any nuns left in Catholic schools. They had all become ex-nuns. And, you were horribly abused? No, you weren't. We were singing folk songs and Negro spirituals in my Catholic schools in the 1960s. But, no, going to a Catholic school, that must have been horrible. No, I don't believe any of these people. Oscar Toe says, I believe Kevin that they were most likely feds, but the point remains that people's irrational fear of rampant Nazis like Witzies in every hedge makes these op works. I don't know. I don't think that there is any kind of fear about Nazis in Canada because, one, there aren't any for a start, and again, if you want to go back to the 1960s when we first heard about the neo-Nazi threat. Who was responsible for this? Guess who was responsible for it? For making up out of whole cloth neo-Nazi movements. Okay, and who else do we have here? That's why Earl Pipe says that's why certain podcasters' attitude, they call us Nazis. We might as well say we're Nazis. Is all the more stupid. Yes, it is very stupid indeed. Is Tim Pool now in the Gulag? Asked Burton Sultanoff. Any validity to the Irish wash houses for wayward girls? There was that film. Couldn't remember the name. Yeah, it was. There's some truth to that. Yes. More common though was when an unmarried Irish girl got pregnant, or you had a lot of cases where young Irish louts, ne'er-do-wells, they were given 20 guineas, say, and put on the packet to Liverpool. The idea was that you are not going to pollute Ireland, with the result that genetically Northern England ended up suffering the brunt. Yes, it was Jerry Useless of the Subhumans. Yeah, some crossover in membership with DOA and the Pointed Sticks. Yes, I knew Jerry Useless a little. I once, after a concert, I just got so fed up with their posturing that, well, I used to like to dress up in suits going to these punk concerts. It disconcerted people. And I conjured up all I could remember of Lenin's left-wing communism and infantile disorder. And I just ranted at him for about 10 minutes for his ideological failings, for his lack of seriousness. I think it was one of the funniest things I ever did. But yeah, let's get back to it here. And I'm still on the same topic. And life after hate. I go to these sites and who we are. Who pays for you? That's what I'm looking for. Who pays for you? Now, Life After Hate is headquartered in Chicago, Illinois. How would an admitted neo-Nazi be allowed to live? Why is it set up in the United States? Huh? Apparently, McAleer lives in Vancouver. I found very, very little about this organization and what it actually does at their website. They're a conduit, obviously, for government money. Let's go back to the Center for Countering Digital Hate. Okay. The CEO of which is Imran Ahmed. According to Wiki, the CCDH has targeted social media platforms for what it says are insufficient efforts on their part to fight neo-Nazis and anti-vaccine advocates. How's that looking right now? January 2020, the CCDH campaigned against Katie Hopkins, a far-right political commentator. She's not a far-right political commentator. And George Galloway, a veteran left-wing politician and broadcaster. I have no time for George Galloway, but this campaign to cancel him. Do you know that Jason Kenney had him banned from Canada, as well as Serge Trifkowitz of Chronicles? He banned both of them from entering Canada. Stop funding misinformation and trying to cancel this left-wing website called The Canary. And getting Zero Hedged banned from its advertising platform. Because of racist articles about Black Lives Matter. And there's the Toxic 10. These people need to be canceled. Breitbart, the Western Journal, Newsmax, Town Hall, Media Research Center, the Washington Times, the Federalist, the Daily Wire, RT, and the Patriot Post. Eugippius wrote back in January about this strange-looking man called Imran Ahmed. He runs an organization called the Center for Countering Digital Hate, which is devoted to complaining that there are people on the internet who have different opinions about things than he does. Because Ahmed has no following, his main tactic is feeding his research, or so-called research, to sympathetic media organizations in the hope they'll run his lame, prefabricated stories. Elizabeth Thompson is always game for that. In this, Ahmed and CCDH are no different from thousands of other political pressure groups that help journalists coordinate activist reporting. Ahmed has spent the last few months peddling hit pieces on people he calls anti-vaxxers. And yesterday he got Dan Milmo, the Guardian's dim global technology editor, to recycle his fears that, quote, anti-vaxxers are making at least $2.5 million a year from publishing on Substack, or perhaps even as much as $12.5 million, as we see from his testimony to the House of Commons. Apparently now it's hundreds of millions of dollars. Ahmed actually has no idea. He's just playing with his calculator here. It's pretty clear that Ahmed's anxieties are involved in the coordinated media campaign to get Substack to deplatform prominent dissident writers like Alex Berenson, Robert Malone, and Steve Kirsch. I will point out that 2 out of those 3 are, in fact, Jewish. Everything suggests Ahmed started out as an anti-racism campaigner before Corona fried his brain. Now his main thing is screeching about vaccines. This has precious little to do with hate, so Ahmed has made a late-stage course correction and decided that a Center for Countering Digital Hate is also a center for countering misinformation. Poor Ahmed is always trying to maintain the waning attention of his readers. That's why he must print all of his most central works in words in bold. Yes, disinformation, etc., etc. His website has a page where he highlights selected broadcast interviews, most of which happened so long ago they've disappeared from the internet. Elsewhere, in a section entitled Our People, which no longer exists on the website because I checked, where you might expect to see CCDH staff photos and biographies, you instead find, and I swear this is real, nothing but 8 different photos of Ahmed himself. Oh, one of them with Rachel Riley, patron, outside Facebook UK headquarters. Our eightfold Ahmed also has a YouTube channel where he posts scintillating videos like this to his 100 subscribers, who are the anti-vax Substack millionaires. That's one of them. Ahmed spends a lot of time throwing things at the wall and hoping something will stick, and his website is a graveyard of advocacy campaigns with awkward names that you've never heard of, from No Yellow Cards to Hate Book to Toxic 10 to Stop the Sex Offender Schools. He's forever trying to get people to sign petitions against the limited collection of ideological crimes that left liberals worry about: climate change denialism, vaccination exhaustion, racism, and misogyny. Ahmed's latest talking point is that there is an anti-vax industry, which consists of a few people who think for themselves and notice things on the internet, sometimes in return for donations. Quote, anti-vaxxers represent an industry with annual revenues of at least 36 million. It just keeps expanding. Based on a limited view of their finances, based on self-reported filings and publicly available revenue estimates for 22 organizations belonging to 12 of the industry's biggest earners. This anti-vax industry employs at least 266 people. Wow. That's an awful lot of people. I wonder how many thousands, tens of thousands, are now employed by anti-hate, misinformation, disinformation outfits. And Eugipius comments, Ahmed is obviously writing for leftist audiences who will be most comfortable assuming that their ideological opponents are motivated by profit. It is, however, the vaccinators of the world who are making all of the money here. The putative revenues which Ahmed assigns to the anti-vax industry amount to less than 0.3% of the 2021 earnings of BioNTech. And as long as we're talking about industries and setting such low bars for the definition of them, would it not be fair to say that Ahmed is himself part of some kind of progressive advocacy industry? That big red donate button plastered all over his website takes you directly to a page that solicits one-time or monthly donations and suggested amounts ranging from $25 to $250. Although Ahmed is a laughable, untalented copywriter, major press outlets routinely carry his stories. You can find them in the New York Nature and Rolling Stone. He even crops up in a few places you wouldn't expect, like this weird Vogue profile of Selena Gomez. I'm not. Oh, Gomez wrote an email to Sheryl Sandberg pointing out Facebook ads containing lies about election fraud in Facebook groups that were openly preparing for civil war. Yep, that's who you want to. Oh, and Selena Gomez, who is best known for being formerly BFF with Justin Bieber. She takes Sheryl Sandberg, Mark Zuckerberg, Jack Dorsey, Sundar Pichai, and Susan. I used to know how to pronounce that name. Wosicki. That's not true, but never mind. Had all failed the American people. As soon as I saw the way she communicates, Ahmed said, "I understand why her brand is so powerful. There's just this goodness to her. She's very moral, etc., etc., etc." Back to you, Gypius. There are larger conclusions to draw from these bizarre paragraphs wherein Ahmed confesses to ventriloquizing shallow celebrities to yell at Silicon Valley executives for allowing political dissidents on their websites, but I will leave those to you. Ahmed is also very worked up about the sanctity and inviolability of expert opinion, and here too I have advice. If the virologists and the epidemiologists and the immunologists don't want their theories and research to be matters of public discussion, they need to stop interfering in public life. Once virological, epidemiological, and immunological theses became the basis of nationwide house arrests and medical coercion, the public acquires a direct interest in these theses. They are no longer matters for a closed, abstruse gaggle of shadowy experts. Don't like that? Then stop advising governments on lockdowns and vaccination policy and public interest in antibodies, T cells, aerosolized transmission masks, and vaccine efficacy will evaporate. These people are free at literally any moment to end most public discussions over vaccination. Then they can shut up and I can start writing about climate change, the anti-terror establishment, Byzantium, ritual magic in the ancient world, and early modern witchcraft again. If you go to the image gallery for the Center for Countering Digital Hate, you get the same 8 pictures of Imran Ahmed. And according to Alam Bakari at Breitbart, the Center for Countering Digital Hate is backed by a shadowy Swiss investment group that is funding Communist China's bid for global dominance. Yes, they're very big, this group, and China on the Green New Deal. Because no, you don't need fossil fuels in the West. Fossil fuels are evil, so stop using them, which definitely would not benefit China at all. There is an expose on the Oak Foundation at capitalresearch.org called The Left's Green Giant. Very big on climate change. Oh, there's a Canadian connection here. Oak Holdings Limited's 2018 annual report provides some additional insight, noting that Oak Holdings Limited is co-owned by RBC, formerly the Royal Bank of Canada, RBC Trust Company Jersey Limited, an incorporation offshore services entity affiliated with the Royal Bank of Canada Wealth Management, and Oak Fiduciary Services Limited. The purpose of this indirect ownership is unclear and made all the more confusing because the Oak Foundation in Switzerland isn't bound to follow IRS disclosure and filing rules. Well, yes, again, the question is, where is the money coming from? And finally, it just gets scarier and scarier. And Alex Boutillier, who is one of the leading scribes of the CSIS News Network, aka Global News, extremists saw 2021 federal election as an opportunity to plan violence. That's according to CSIS. CSIS revealed that it briefed government agencies on threats to the federal election, including ideologically motivated actors who viewed the election as an opportunity to discourage Canadians from democratic participation or to plan acts of violence. Any details on that? No, that would be top secret. The agency also noticed a significant uptick, or you could say, increase, if you didn't want to sound stupid, in threats against politicians and public servants since 2020. Ideologically motivated violent extremism is the agency's catch-all term for a range of grievance-fueled extremism, but includes far-right, anti-authority, and anti-government, and racist groups motivated to violence. Apparently no violence, like blockades, Indian blockades, destroying $1 million of equipment just a couple of months ago. No. It's just the right. There have been 7 attacks and 3 disrupted plots in the Canadian ideologically motivated extremists of space. Oh, they have a space. since 2014. These attacks have killed 26 people and wounded 40 others on Canadian soil, more than any other form of violent extremism, the agency's 2021 annual report released Friday read. The 2021 federal election saw a level of protest following the campaigns, particularly Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's tour, without precedent in recent elections. The Toronto Star reported, I'm not interested in anything the Toronto Star has to report, but the anger in some pockets of Canadian society extends beyond visceral feelings towards Trudeau. MPs from multiple parties have detailed hostile interactions and threatening behavior while performing their public duties. And of course, this never happened until a couple of years ago. MPs have always been the subject of threatening letters, death threats, threatening telephone calls, death threats, telephone, people yelling obscenities at them in public. That's part of what goes with the job. Oh, and they bring in Michelle Rempel-Garner to weep a little more. The convoy protests, they have prompted reflection within Canadian intelligence and law enforcement circles. Reflection on how to investigate increasingly obvious civil unrest. What is clear from CSIS's perspective is that since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, the threat has been, quote, fueled by an increase in extreme anti-authority and anti-government rhetoric, often rooted in the weaponization of conspiracy theories. Is it a conspiracy theory that I'm not allowed on an airplane? Is it a conspiracy theory that I'm not allowed on a train? That's not a conspiracy. Is it a conspiracy theory that governments across this country shut down their societies? Is that a conspiracy theory? And to conclude, Global News, a reliable news source, reported in March that CSIS now spends as much time and resources tracking ideological domestic extremism as it does religiously motivated terrorism, a significant shift in the agency's priorities over the last 6 years. And I'll tell you why, to go back to the beginning. This is to delegitimize all opposition to the Liberal Party, except that, say, for the NDP. The NDP supports the Liberals and is in an informal coalition with them. If you are not on the left, if you are not progressive, you are illegitimate in my country of Canada. And the government means to shut us up, to cancel us, to destroy us. The same, Biden is trying, and the Department of Justice and other agencies, Homeland Security, are trying the same thing in the United States, but there is far more resistance in the United States. There is almost no resistance whatsoever to this, and you're not going to get any resistance from Pierre Poilievre. Oh no, he knows not to rock the boat. I've mentioned previously a woman called Tasha Karidan, born in 1970, according to Wiki, a Canadian public affairs commentator, consultant, lawyer, policy analyst, and writer. She is a PR spiv. Okay? And for some reason, the Hill Times, which is the insiders publication in Ottawa for political insiders, has a lengthy profile of this woman. Family is the guidepost for Charest campaign co-chair Tasha Karidan. This is by Christopher Gooley. For conservative Politico, Tasha Karidan, her complicated family's past has shaped her identity. The sense of family that comes with politics has fueled her in political engagement, and having a family of her own is what keeps her grounded. Oh, isn't that sweet? Why are we devoting hundreds of words to backroom boys and girls, to PR spiv? The current federal conservative leadership campaign may well be remembered as a study of contrasts. Well, for the first time, not only between the candidates, Pierre Poilievre, who's drawing crowds of those disaffected with the Liberal government, and Jean Charest, who appeals to moderate conservatives, yay, in favor of their party taking more of a big tent approach. And, included in that big tent is applauding the sexual mutilation of children and voting for a bill that criminalizes counseling children, including your own children, against, changing their sex and taking hormone shots and the like, and surgery and all the rest of it. That's part of the big conservative tent in Canada now. Jenny Byrne is mentioned, who's running Poilievre's campaign. Perhaps more name recognizable is Tasha Corridon, a principal at Toronto-based Navigator Limited, PR spiv firm, who also serves as co-chair along Rubicon Strategy Group, PR spiv firm, co-founder and executive chairman Michael Coates of Charest's leadership campaign. Politics in my country is dominated by PR spivs, just as, strangely enough, and outrageously so, a political opinion is dominated by PR spivs. And I will say once again, PR spivs should not be allowed to contribute op-ed pieces unless at the bottom of their column is a list of their company's clients, because the conflict of interest here is obviously off the scale. As a political commenter, the 51-year-old Corridon has a familiar byline as a columnist with the National Post and a familiar face as a frequent guest on CTV News, CBC News, and Radio Canada. Yet beyond her media profile, which includes stints as host of the former CPAC Supreme Court of Canada series Legal Talk and host of CTV News' channel's former weekday series National Affairs, Corridon's personal story is not widely known. Why should it be? It turns out it's a very strange story that her father was German, and then he changed his name to Fariz Jamil Corridon. He was born Siegfried Bergner, and there's a lot of stuff about World War II here. Oh, and apparently one of her relatives is partly Jewish. This woman has been solely concerned with politics her entire life. And these are the people who should not be running things. As a young teenager, when Ronald Reagan came along in 1980, shining city on a hill. Oh, Margaret Thatcher, she was a woman and a prime minister, and she was a conservative. Oh, she dipped her toe into politics at the age of 14 when Brian Mulroney's Progressive Conservatives were running to form the next government in the 1984 federal election. So she worked on that election. In the summer, I went to the campaign office and I was hooked. After years of liberal rule, there was a sense of change in the air, and Mulroney wasn't really a unifier. Well, he may have been a unifier, but he was not a conservative, not even close. Corridon said that she also discovered a, quote, sense of community and found her tribe, unquote. She actually said that. That's her tribe. When she became a member of the PC Youth Federation, for which she would serve as national president from 1994 to 1997. People who get involved in campus politics and partisan politics as youths are, as a general rule, the worst people in the world. I was always a really nerdy kid. I never really had any friends. Oh, another sob story. I was tiny. My nickname in high school was Shrimp because I was the shortest kid in grades 7 and 8. Oh, she eventually shot up to 5'8". Well, I'm glad to hear that. She headed up the Federal Tories Youth Wing, worked closely with Jean Charest, the first francophone to hold the post of national leader of the Conservatives. Brian Mulroney was a francophone, you idiot who wrote this story. She actually considered running for the leadership of the Conservative Party in Canada, despite never being elected to anything, despite being a professional PR spiv. Oh, she has a new book out, which may have something to do with this interview. It's called The Right Path. Yeah, let's just drive that metaphor into the ground. How conservatives can unite, inspire, and take Canada forward. More of the same, I would guess. Perhaps a little more efficient. Okay. So, yeah, she talks about how all these people wanted her to become prime minister. And, she compares Pierre Poilievre to Donald Trump. Pierre Poilievre he's too divisive, the champion of the disaffected. I'm not saying Pierre is Trump in the sense of policies, but his style definitely is the same sense of riding a movement with people upset about various things. Knowing her family roots has helped shape her identity. Having her own family grounds her. Corridon has a 12-year-old daughter from a past relationship with L. Ian MacDonald, the publisher and editor of Policy magazine. L. Ian MacDonald is Conservative Party royalty. What a coincidence. Athletic and artistic and an A student, Zara has Asperger's syndrome, which is on the autism spectrum and is normally characterized by difficulties in social interaction. She sees things outside the box and is good at reading people. Autistic people are good at reading people and takes me out of my comfort zone, says Corredon. She's made me a better person and made me more empathetic. When Corredon was a columnist for the Toronto Sun and the National Post, she was constantly writing about her daughter and bashing the Doug Ford's government in Ontario. Why isn't there enough spending on autism, particularly children with severe autism? I'm going to suggest that if her daughter is athletic and an A student and is good at reading people, then she's really not that autistic. But this is a woman who dared to wave her daughter around like a bloody shirt. I have nothing against Tasha Corridon's success. I just, it enrages me, though, that my country's politics, as previously mentioned, dominated by PR spivs. And let's go back to the chat. Again, you know, this is the same in both parties. If you look at the people who run the Liberal Party, the Conservative Party, the NDP Party, increasingly their lives have been entirely politics. Stephen Harper never had a job outside of, I believe, his father got him a summer job at Imperial Oil. Whole life politics. Tasha Corredon, whole life politics. And this is increasingly the case in the United States. These people have no life experience. They are in a bubble. Everyone they know are people like them. I gave an example of what these type of people are like. Maybe you run into some of them. Let's say that it's the end of term at university, and you're in a dorm. So some woman goes around, celebrating the end of term, the end of exams, and says, yard marks as skeepers, yard marks as skeepers, yard marks as skeepers. People say, yeah, sure. I'm in. And then they get to a certain type of girl or boy. Oh, I'd love to, but I can't. Oh, why not? Oh, Stephen Harper's giving a speech to the American Enterprise Institute. Yeah, but that'll be up on YouTube, right? You can watch it later. Yeah, but a bunch of us are live tweeting it. Yeah, that's what these people are like. They're poison. Let's look at Jim Kunstler's column for today, which is called Nausea Rules. Financial markets puked this week. They must have started reading the news. Let's face it, the headlines are a little short of reassuring. The $6.49 price on a gallon of diesel is enough alone to tell you that the nation can't do business the way it's set up to do. And there isn't a new model for running things ready to launch, not even Klaus Schwab's utopia of robots and eunuchs. What's out there, rather, is a model of breakdown and collapse, which the woked-up globalist neo-Jacobins are doing everything possible to hasten. U.S.-inspired sanctions on Russia have quickly blown up in America's face. How's that ban on Russian oil working? Do you understand that U.S. shale oil, the bulk of our production, is exceptionally light in composition, meaning it contains not much of the heavier distillates like diesel and aviation fuel? 'Tis so, alas. Truckers won't truck at $6.49 a gallon, and before long they'll be out of business altogether, especially the independents who have whopping mortgages on their rigs that won't be paid. The equation is tearfully simple. No trucks equals no U.S. economy. Europe, the old original homeland of Western Civ, isn't just losing face, it's blowing its head clean off, going along with Joe Biden's economic war. Are Germany, France, and the rest of that bunch really so dead set on jamming Ukraine into NATO that they're willing to go full medieval for it? By which I mean sitting in the cold and dark with empty plates. That's a hard way to go just to prove somebody else's point. The war in Ukraine itself was apparently losing its sex appeal for the click-hungry news media. No matter which way the New York Times and Friends tried to spin it, they failed to grok both Russia's determination to neutralize Ukraine and its ability to get the job done, even if it takes a longer than expected grind to finish. That's how important it was to Russia that Ukraine not become a forward missile base and bioweapons lab for its adversaries. When that operation concludes, the West will be left economically crippled and humiliated, which are conditions that historically portend regime change. Will America cough up Joe Biden like a hairball to get those trucks running again? Might the Dems themselves resort to releasing the kraken known as Hunter's laptop just to send the old grifter packing? In the meantime, the leaked Roe v. Wade cancellation ruling shoved the Ukraine fiasco offstage so as to provoke more useful histrionics for the dreaded midterm elections upcoming. The poorly understood truth is that said ruling will only send the abortion question back to the individual states. But let's get real. Places like New York, Massachusetts, Maryland, and California are not going to enact any new anti-abortion laws, and that's where most of the people having hebephrenic breakdowns over the issue live, which is to say there's little danger that the shrieking denizens of these blue states will lack abortions. So how has the party only been pretending that Roe v. Wade is its primal touchstone? Kunstler continues, the strange parallel question has been raised. Might laissez-faire abortion be a cover for the evident new problem that COVID vaccines have made a shocking number of birthing people incapable of reproducing? There's a buzz about it anyway. It's a fact that Pfizer excluded pregnant and breastfeeding women from all phases of its mRNA trials. Among the various harms now ascribed to the mRNA shots are infertility, miscarriage, and newborn abnormalities. But of course, that sort of rumor, here coming from cases among vaccinated military personnel and not so easily hushed up, is just what the many lurking censors want to slap down in any forum where ideas could be exchanged. It's misinformation. And so the derangement volume knob over Twitter changing ownership stays up at 11. Imagine what will happen if the supposedly 70-odd% of Americans who got vaxxed learn in a reliberated Twitter zone that the COVID vaccines are not quite so safe and effective. According to Zero Hedge, also the Daily Mail, 26 globalist NGOs with ties to George Soros signed a letter saying, quote, Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter will further toxify our information ecosystem and be a direct threat to public safety, especially among those already most vulnerable and marginalized, unquote. They are, as usual, projecting. Since what is a greater threat to public safety than inducing tens of millions of frightened citizens to accept multiple shots of a poorly tested pharmaceutical cocktail that can kill you 6 ways to Sunday? The folks in charge and others who would like to be the boss of you don't want you to know any of this. The pharma companies, the doctors, the hospital administrators, and the politicians must be frantic with terror of being found out. And Kunstler concludes, well, Kunstler has two kinds of columns. There's the doom column, and there's the everything's going to be all right column. This is one of the doom columns. Altogether, the scene looks like a multidimensional nightmare: broken economy, sinking Western civ, police state tyranny, vaccine death and injury, starvation. So there it is. Oh, look, those markets, they're puking again. And more on Joe Biden. This is from Hannah Nightingale at the Post-Millennial. On Thursday, a lawsuit was filed by 2 Republican-led states which alleged that President Joe Biden and other administration officials pressured and colluded with big tech companies to censor the Hunter Biden laptop story, as well as information regarding the lab leak origin theory of COVID-19 and the security of voting by mail. And this is from, Missouri and Louisiana. The lawsuit names a number of top officials within the Biden administration, including White House Press Secretary not Jennifer, but Jen Psaki, U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services Xavier Becerra, Chief Medical Advisor and NIAID Director Dr. Anthony Fauci, Secretary of Department of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas, and newly announced Director of the DHS's Disinformation Government Board. It also mentions the HHS, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, the Centers for Disease Control, Department of Homeland Security, and Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. And what's going on with the stock market? This is from Bloomberg. Standard & Poor's 500 suffers longest weekly losing streak in decade. Volatility continued to dominate financial markets, with stocks pushing lower as the latest U.S. jobs data cemented expectations the Federal Reserve will remain on its rate hike path to combat stubbornly high inflation. The tech-heavy NASDAQ 100 underperformed. Treasury 10-year yields remained above 3%, while the dollar rose. Gasoline futures in New York settled at a record high. Again, the Biden administration, or who's ever running it, their decision to destroy the world economy, destroy trade, supply, etc. This is boomeranged on the Biden administration. But one has to ask, was this really an accident, or is this part of the Great Reset or Build Back Better? Because if current trends continue, as they say, there is definitely going to be a great reset. Well, great in the sense of being big, not great in the sense of being good. We've previously mentioned on this show that the replacement for Jen, not Jennifer, but Jen Psaki, is a threefer. She is a Haitian immigrant, a Black, and a lesbian, and she is called Karine Jean-Pierre. And she is married. And who is she married to? Well, she's married to someone in the media, but not just anyone in the media. She is married to CNN correspondent Suzanne Malveaux. According to the Washington Free Beacon, her relationship with the CNN reporter raises ethical questions about her new role. The White House did not respond to a request for comment about whether Jean-Pierre would recuse herself in dealing with CNN. Malveau's colleagues include Valerie Jarrett's daughter, but of course, CNN Justice correspondent Laura Jarrett. Yes, according to CNN, Suzanne Malveaux will continue in her role as CNN national correspondent covering national, international news and cultural events, but will not cover politics, Capitol Hill, or the White House. Well, Karine Jean-Pierre is serving as White House press secretary. Of course, let's see. National, international news, that has nothing to do with the White House or the Biden administration, right? Because there's a firewall there. Because the Biden administration, what it says and does only affects the United States of America. It in no way, affects the rest of the world. Suzanne Malveaux, quite a good-looking woman. We were talking about passing earlier in the week. She identifies as Black, although I would guess she's no more than about 20% Black. Yeah, rather like that woman. I'm trying to think of her name. Also with CNN. Beautiful woman. Very angry for some reason. Was it Soledad? Yeah. Soledad O'Brien. There's a name for you, huh? Who was mocked on 30 Rock as Jack said something about her. And he said, that's not racist because we don't know what race she is. It's a terribly sad story from, it's all the same, Karine Jean-Pierre. And it's, it's a gay origin story. Jean-Pierre last year told a difficult story of coming out to her conservative Haitian family to mark Pride Month. She had previously recounted in her 2019 book her attempt to take her own life. Because, let's get teenagers thinking about suicide. Let's fill the heads of teenagers with suicidal ideation. What could go wrong there? Her sister, Edwine, found her unconscious and saved her. She said, Jean-Pierre said she decided to kill herself to the sounds of Mary J. Blige's song, Everlasting Love. Wow. Suicide soundtrack. Not quite up there with Ian Curtis, but, And strange things afoot in the Ukraine, the borderlands, Little Russia, whatever you want to call it. And the Canadian media isn't interested in this story. Golly, I wonder why. This is from VoltaireNet.org. Canadian general arrested in Mariupol. The Russian armed forces arrested Canadian General Trevor Cadieux in Mariupol on the night of 2 to 3 May. He is currently in Moscow awaiting to stand trial. General Cadieux was apparently not on a mission for his government, but was in charge of Laboratory Number 1 with 18 staff working under his control. The National Pulse reported that Hunter Biden, son of U.S. President Joe Biden, and Christopher Hines, John Kerry's son-in-law, had organized subcontracting arrangements for Ukrainian research laboratories through their firm Rosemount Capital on behalf of the Pentagon's Defense Threat Reduction Agency. Yeah. Now, Cadieux was kicked out of the Canadian military, supposedly, because of a charge of sexual harassment or sexual assault that went back to a military college, what was it, 25, 30, 35 years ago, something like that? Obviously bogus. Was this the cover story to get him out of Canada and into the Ukraine? But again, you're not going to read anything about this at all in the Canadian media. And of course, the Ukraine is a bastion of freedom. We all know that, right? Here's a story from Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News. A popular YouTuber and critic of President Zelensky was arrested in Spain at the behest of the Ukrainian government on charges of treason and faces extradition despite publicly condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Yes, really. Anatoly Shary, who has almost 3 million YouTuber subscribers, was detained on an international arrest warrant in a joint operation by Spanish and Ukrainian police, as well as international so-called partners, according to the Ukrainian Security Service, SBU. They claim that Shary has been acting on behalf of foreign forces by infringing Ukraine's national security via his media commentary on the war and engaging in, quote, incitement of hatred, unquote. Shary's arrest, quote, is more proof that every traitor of Ukraine will sooner or later receive his well-deserved punishment. It is inevitable, unquote, the SBU asserted. The blogger had previously been granted asylum by the EU in 2012 after fleeing persecution by the government of Viktor Yanukovych, who was pro-Russian. Despite condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Shary's criticism of Zelensky's response was apparently enough for him to be targeted by Ukrainian authorities. Having had his passport seized, Shary is now in Barcelona under a travel ban until a decision on his extradition to Ukraine is made. President Zelensky's representative at the Constitutional Court says Shary will face a Ukrainian court and will be held liable in line with Ukrainian laws. In response to his arrest, Shary posted a picture of his wife feeding parrots in Barcelona, commenting, "This really is a comedy." Dan Cohen tweets, AP accompanies Zelensky's SBU thugs as they kidnap Ukrainians who speak out against the regime. This is an obvious propaganda piece designed to normalize crushing dissent. Imagine how they act when the cameras aren't on. And of course, Zelensky has pretty much shut down every TV network in Canada or in Ukraine that he doesn't control, and he's also shut down dozens of newspapers. Here's a piece from John Daniel Davidson at The Federalist. It's not too much to ask that Congress debate and vote on whether to authorize a U.S. march to war that's now well underway. The New York Times claimed this week that the United States is providing real-time battlefield intelligence to Ukraine that has enabled the Ukrainians to target and kill approximately a dozen Russian generals and help locate and strike the flagship of Russia's Black Sea Fleet last month. Described as a classified effort, the U.S. provision of targeting intelligence to Ukraine also includes anticipated Russian troop movements gleaned from recent American assessments of Moscow's secret battle plan for the fighting in the Donbass region of eastern Ukraine, according to the Times. The Times reporting relies on anonymous senior American officials, but if true, it represents a sharp and unprecedented escalation of U.S. involvement in the Russo-Ukrainian war, such that Congress should immediately debate and vote on whether to authorize the use of military force in Ukraine. Let's just see, just poke the bear, just keep on poking the bear, and just wait until your provocations reach such a point that the Russians decide, oh, I don't know, they're killing our generals, maybe we should start killing theirs. And, World War III is definitely worth it in order to, secure the territorial integrity of the most corrupt country in the Western world. In more Ukrainian news, this is from Olivia Beavers at Politico. Representative Victoria Spartz topped a nonpartisan group World Bosses list last year, winning the dubious title of most staff turnover in the House. Her retention record is only getting worse. Nobody wants to work for her, yelling and screaming at them, calling them stupid over and over again. And they all leave. And apparently, she's a hard taskmaster. And that's what she says. That, not everyone can fit in because I insist upon hard work, good work. But she's a first. Yep. I'm hoping that we're going to run out of firsts. They're going to have to become more and more complicated. Spartz, a 43-year-old former state senator, is experiencing a period of heightened visibility as the first Ukrainian immigrant elected to the House. Oh, isn't that sweet? She shared emotional stories about the distress she's experienced keeping in touch with her family during Russia's brutal assault on Ukraine. Maybe if she felt that much about her family, she shouldn't have left her homeland. And if you look at pictures of this woman, she looks like she should be, in the Lubyanka torturing prisoners, torturing them to death. That's what she looks like. But apparently there is some question about this first. Okay. According to Wikipedia, Spartz is the first Ukrainian-born female member of Congress and the first member born in a former Soviet republic. At least two past members of Congress were born in the then Russian Empire, Herman Koppelman and Herman Toll. Okay. But she's a first and a woman. This is from The Guardian, from Lauren Gambino. Biden praises Lockheed workers for making weapons for Ukrainian heroes. Wow. The merchants of death meet World War kitsch. Isn't that just so sweet? Joe Biden Tuesday told assembly line workers at an Alabama factory that the weapons they are crafting, are going into the hands of Ukrainian heroes on the front lines of the effort to repel Russian forces. The U.S. president praised the employees of the Lockheed Martin plant that manufactures Javelin anti-tank missiles. And you may have noticed that, and this has been noted, that Joe Biden is now, people don't want to see Joe Biden. So what they're doing is they're putting weapons in formation around him. Yes, they're actually doing that. And let's take a look back at the chat. Okay, here we go. It was bizarre, says David the Gnome. Hello, Dan says Brand's favorite weapon artisans. Yes, I remember that duck in a noose line, says David the Gnome. Handmade missiles, says Mercurius Olycus. It's just, when did this happen? How many decades was it ago? It happened definitely during my lifetime that people used to say handmade. Oh, or, the British would say bespoke. People know what that means. But now, handcrafted. Oh, and typically lovingly handcrafted. Why handcrafted? Handmade. It means the same thing. Is crafted a more cuddly word than made? What do you think of the 4-day work week, says Palpcasso 88? It depends on what you mean. It's like a 32-hour week instead of a 40-hour week. Because I used to work a 4-day work week. And the work's, it's a question of how much work is done in these places anyway. We learned this from the COVID epidemic, but no one seems to have taken the lesson to heart. If all these people, including most civil servants, can supposedly work from home, with their dog running amongst their feet or their baby crawling over their laptop, this is telling me they're not working at all. Earl Pipe says, finding out the CIA sourced intelligence from a blog run by an something awful moderator ruined all confidence I had in Western military intelligence. Oh, this is reference to something I already said. Speaking of that, included one of the weirdest press conferences concerning a criminal case where the police chief read that duck in a noose quote to the snipers. The last famous Malvo was one of the DC snipers, says Earl Pipe. Gas is $2.17 a liter in Vancouver, says Palcasso 88. I remember when it reached $1.60 some years ago, and people were almost visibly panicking. Blue hair for a blue state, says Earl Pipe. Goodbye to Birkin Sultanov. Thank you for tuning in. How about dem javelins, says Brian Frakes. Who else do we have here? True Greenbeard. Does anyone recall that human interest story in the news about the woman with autism who designed slaughterhouses for cattle? She was held up as a successful person with autism. Temple Grandin, according to True Greenberg. I've been reading about some comedian in England that the elite is trying to make popular. She is a woman with cerebral palsy, such that little to nothing of what she says can be understood. And then everyone just, is she finished talking? They're looking at her. Is she finished talking? Okay. This is what it's come to. Okay. PR spiv is a great term, and it is not mine. Simon Heffer, the British journalist, author of an outstanding biography of Enoch Powell, coined the term with reference to David Cameron, the former Prime Minister of Great Britain. David Cameron, as I was saying earlier, has spent his entire life in Canada, except for a brief period where he worked as a PR spiv for Carlton TV, and guess what his job was? Lobbying the government. And how are we looking here for time? Let's go to Pedro Gonzalez's Twitter feed. Again, I suppose I've been falling down in terms of reporting news on the ground from Ukraine, but the media has decided, and Twitter and Facebook and the like, that we're not allowed to hear it because it might cause SADS, because the Ukraine, isn't kicking ass the way they're supposed to. And Coulter reacts to a Mediaite story. Meghan McCain's new memoir, Bad Republican, flops with fewer than 300 copies sold. And Coulter says, what do you figure those 300 copies cost Lindsey Graham? Meghan McCain was on The View for years and years, right? One would think that someone who's on TV every day, 5 days a week, that their book is going to sell a fair amount of copies. But increasingly we see that television is populated by people that nobody likes. I asked Chet Hanks if he wanted to apologize to any marginalized communities. Apparently that's a thing. Pedro Gonzalez says amazing. And we see Chet Hanks, son of Tom Hanks. This is on something called Ziwe, Z-I-W-E. And he's shaking his head. Nope. He's being interviewed by a black woman, and he's not availing himself of the opportunity to apologize. Oh, this is a review of The Northman. Scary movie. It's about white men. It's not like that Vikings TV series where you got some black African woman running some town in Scandinavia in the Middle Ages. Where would these people even come from? This was before the age of slavery. There were no African people in Scandinavia or in Britain or in France or in Germany. Never mind that. Macho stereotype. Eggers complained of a brawny warrior who settles most disputes with a sword and without a shirt. Skarsgård's love interest, played by Anya Taylor-Joy, could be the far-right male's dream woman. Beautiful. I like that. Fair-haired. Loyal to her man. committed to bearing his offspring. That's the dream. Even before the film's release, far-right voices were giving their approval. I think that this new disinformation bureau should be looking into this. Someone called Jardin Secret 888 commented, "Oh yes, toxic characteristics of a woman that are exclusive to the far right, physically attractive, faithful, and excited to have children with her chosen partner." Pedro Gonzalez tweets, "The American Conservative Union, which hosts CPAC, spoke out against Tennessee's new law to make people convicted of violent crimes serve 100% of their sentences without the possibility of parole. The problem with the official conservative movement is that it isn't a conservative movement." This is a commentary on a tweet by Daniel Horowitz, today's hour-long special with Pedro Gonzalez, why the conservative movement has been such a failure. Stop calling yourself conservatives. There's an easy way out of this swamp. Stop calling yourself conservative. Call yourself patriots. Then you won't have to deal with, oh, well, yeah, this guy who ran a magazine that failed says you're not a real conservative. No, not a conservative. I'm a patriot. You notice that Donald Trump did not call himself a conservative when he was running in 2015 and 2016. There is a reason for that. Spivey Consulting tweets breaking. The American Bar Association is officially recommending the elimination of the standardized test requirement for admission to law school. Darren J. Beatty of Revolver News comments, "Must get rid of everything strongly correlated with native intelligence. Society must cater to stupid people who are wealthy and connected and stupid people who have the right diversity requirement." Yeah, wait till this gets to the level of engineers. Because that's where it's going. Well, it's already got to the level of physicians. Oh, you're learning disabled? Well, let's give you twice as long for the MCAT. Nothing bad could happen because of that. Who says that stupid people? Oh, we won't call them stupid. We'll come up with some euphemism for that. Why shouldn't they become physicians? This is from Information Liberation. Unhinged Obama judge orders every U.S. ISP to block streaming sites accused of copyright infringement. Oh, accused of copyright infringement. Oh, finally, some good news. This is from Martin Robinson and Tom Pyman from the Daily Mail. Royal experts warn that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's return risks becoming focus of Platinum Jubilee row as couple defy Queen ban and announce comeback minutes after revelation that they won't be on Buckingham Palace balcony. Buckingham Palace said today that only royals carrying out official public duties will be on the balcony. Snub of the Sussexes and the Duke of York came after careful consideration. There are exceptions, including Princess Anne's husband and some grandchildren and great-grandchildren. But despite the balcony snub, Harry, Meghan, Archie, and Lilibet will jet to the UK for some Jubilee events. A spokesman said the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are excited and honored to attend with their children. No one wants them there. And did you hear that their Netflix streaming animated series was canceled? Excellent, excellent. Harry to return after being reassured over security arrangements. Yeah, he was suing. Was he suing the government over this? It's time for the Queen to strip the Sussexes of their titles. They are a threat to the future of the monarchy. This is from Molly Hemingway and Carrie Severino at The Federalist. The left failed to defeat Brett Kavanaugh in 2018, but they did not shed their radicalism. They only got more strident. And here's a picture of a bunch of women dressed in their hands-made tails outfits. And again, I will suggest that this idea of subjugation excites them sexually. And immediately after the leak of the Alito's decision or draft decision, Roe v. Wade, we learned that the sort of left-wing dark money groups that brought the Supreme Court confirmation process to new lows with their antics with Justice Kavanaugh's hearings are at it again. An outfit calling itself Ruth Sent Us has posted a map with the home addresses of what it calls the 6 extremist justices and organized protests next week at their personal homes. They're also calling for Catholic churches to be desecrated. Do you remember the circus of obstruction and vilification that the left inflicted on the nation in opposition to Brett Kavanaugh's 2018 nomination? We documented it in our book, Justice on Trial. Protesters funded by dark money groups, including Planned Parenthood, shutting down the Senate Judiciary Committee and having to be dragged out by police with over 200 arrests. Protesters dressed like handmaids converging on Capitol Hill to communicate that Kavanaugh's confirmation would hurl America into a dark dystopia. And how about the Democratic senators who went along, waging scurrilous arguments to try to delegitimize the nominee from the outset and interrupting their own hearings on the Senate Judiciary Committee 63 times before the first lunch break. Once Kavanaugh officially joined the court, he did not make the traditional walk down the marble steps of the court out of a concern for his safety. Oh, Chuck Schumer threatened Justices Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch by name in front of the Supreme Court after oral arguments in an abortion case, warning that they would, quote, pay the price, unquote, for a disagreeable decision. Who funds Ruth Sent Us? There are a number of unanswered questions about the Ruth Sent Us group. Its website notes stipends are available for protesters. Who exactly is paying for these stipends? Recall that during the Kavanaugh hearings, left-wing groups also provided financial incentives for protesters, including offering lodging to traveling protesters and jail and bail support if necessary. The website links to different organizations, Strike for Choice, which shows connections to groups including Black Lives Matter, Code Pink, Women's March SF, Kavanaugh Off Our Court, and Rise Up for Abortion Rights. How exactly are these groups connected? Similar to Biden's White House, the Ruth Sent Us website purports to advocate for peaceful protests. Is that like the mostly peaceful protests burning down cities across the country 2 years ago at the BLM organized demonstrations? Already this week, pro-abortion protesters and police clashed in Los Angeles when a group of protesters began to throw rocks and bottles in a demonstration in front of the federal courthouse. Will groups like Demand Justice condemn these protests at justices' homes? So far, they've been silent. What about Demand Justice board member Eli Mistal? And you remember he's the guy who always shows up wearing a freight wig, who called the Constitution kind of trash. Demand Justice's executive director, Brian Fallon, has instead criticized the increased security measures being taken at the Supreme Court itself, stating that the court needs more accountability, not less. Sounds a lot like not Jennifer Psaki yesterday. Psaki's stunning comments yesterday should also come as no surprise, given that she herself worked for Demand Justice before joining the White House. This is, after all, the White House that left-wing dark money built. Demand Justice was launched by the Arabella Advisors Network, which spent over $1 billion in the 2020 election cycle to help elect Joe Biden president and win a Democratic Senate. And I think we're going to, considering time constraints, we're going to have to skip Joseph Tainter today. He'll be back Monday. I know you're disappointed. Kim Kardashian. Okay, here we go. This is from Dan Wooten at the Daily Mail. I don't know, is this a provocation? The shameless entrepreneurial spirit of the Kardashian clan is in many ways to be respected. Is it now? Explain. Turning the leak of a grainy sex tape into a multi-billion-dollar business that has spawned the world's most talked-about celebrities for 15 years is a feat few could have pulled off. Yes, they pulled it off, but should they have? But then again, how many mothers would, according to Ray J, actively advocate their daughter releasing to the world a video showing her engaging in sexual activity with her then more famous boyfriend as a 21-year-old? Look, everyone has lied about this from the start. You cannot sell sex tapes legally without getting the people involved to sign on the line that is dotted. Oh, no, this was against our will. No, it wasn't. Because if it was against your will, the people selling these tapes could have been arrested and they would have gone to prison. So they were in on it from the beginning. While rumors about the origin of the sex tape have lingered for for years. It's only exploded to the public domain this week because of two key incidents. First, Kim tried to rewrite history about the circumstances of what made her famous during episode 2 of her new Hulu reality show, when her estranged husband, Kanye West, delivered a hard drive from Ray J that allegedly included unreleased material from the pair's sex tape. I don't want to get too disgusting here, but I will explain why this particular sex tape of an unknown woman in a barely known whatever it is that Ray J does. He's Brandy's brother. He supposedly on this tape, not the version that was released publicly, but presumably that version still exists, performed an act so disgusting on Kim Kardashian that I blushed to the roots of my remaining hair, even thinking about it. Then yesterday, the largely forgotten hip-hop star of yesteryear who became collateral damage in the Kardashians' thirsty quest for fame. Aw, poor Ray J. How many reality shows did they give that clown? Gave a truly extraordinary exclusive interview to Daily Mail, revealing for the first time the full circumstances around the tape's original release. Now a father battling to rescue his reputation, he doesn't have one. Ray J's revelations are damning, and it's clear to me that he's ended up the victim of this sordid saga. You see this here? It's the world's tiniest violin. He never leaked the sex tape. He says it entered the public domain thanks to a deal stitched up by Chris with him and Kim, who, inspired by Paris Hilton's X-rated fame, had full knowledge it was about to be released. And it goes on like this. Oh, a $100 million deal signed with Vivid Entertainment. Everything about the Kardashians is disgusting. And that the message that this sends to the young women of America and the world is that to get ahead, you should literally prostitute yourself and engage in a whole host of fake relationships, such as marrying an obvious closeted homosexual like Kanye West, and then pretending to have children. These poor children have been procured from somewhere, but that is the fashion now. Only lower class people actually, physically beget children. Of course, apparently, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have 2 children. Do they now? I don't think they do, because the extraordinary secrecy surrounding their birth and the fact that, look, here's a picture of our child. Wow, that looks enormously large for a child supposedly of that age. But in more Kim K news, is Pete Davidson looking to be murdered? I don't think that Kanye West is really up to that sort of thing, but I suspect that he knows people who are. This is from George Stark at the Daily Mail, which is, of course, your one-stop shop for all Kardashian news. Pete Davidson compares Kanye West to Mrs. Doubtfire in his new Netflix comedy special, making light of the custody drama between his girlfriend, Kim Kardashian, and her ex-husband. Earlier this year, Kanye, 44, made a string of accusations that Kim, 41, was preventing him from having full access to their 4 children. Here we go. North, Saint, Chicago, and Psalm. In a move that is sure to enrage the rapper, SNL Funny Man. Has this fellow ever made anyone laugh? Pete devotes a segment in Netflix as a joke, The Festival, where he admits to secretly hoping that Kim's ex-husband pulls a Mrs. Doubtfire. I come home one day and they're like, this is the new housekeeper. And he's like, what's up, fam? Oh, okay. Certainly topical. I don't believe that Pete Davidson, that there's anything coital going on between him and Kim Kardashian. All right. Here's a story from Mel magazine. Concerned about Roe, these women are turning to sterilization. Pseudonymous gas station clerk Eleanor is just 20, but she knows that she never wants children. No, you don't know that. I have a lot of trauma from my childhood. No, get in the queue, Eleanor. And I wouldn't want risk continuing that cycle of abuse. Oh, something about gendered here. Okay, which made me laugh. Oh, yes, here we go. For many women, sterilization isn't as simple as just calling the doctor and booking an appointment. As reported by The Conversation in 2018, women in the US face extraordinary difficulties in seeking the birth control method of sterilization. Is sterilization really a birth control method? Regularly being denied the procedure due to the gendered assumption that they'll one day regret it, and facing significantly higher monetary barriers to it than men. In fact, a vasectomy is 5 times cheaper than tubal ligation. That's because vasectomy is outside operation instead of inside operation, which is obviously far more dangerous and is thus far more expensive. No, but it's all part of a gendered plot. And what else we got? Oh, yes. Yeah. This is good here. Things are moving with regard to Agenda 21. Things are moving quickly. Build Back Better. Great Reset. This is from @Dale for Trump. UN announces Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum and UN General Secretary Antonio Guterres have signed an agreement to, quote, accelerate Agenda 2030. Everyone should be on red alert right now. Pirates Ireland commented, looks like we're skipping climate change and going straight into recession. Recession? Soon enough, people are going to be cheering for a recession. And as we know, in 2030, you won't own anything and you will like it. This is from Ben Bailey at National File. With dramatic rent price hikes in just about all major cities, people are looking for cheaper alternatives. Now, for about $800 per month, residents can opt to sleep in a pod. Brownstone, a recent Los Angeles-based startup, is matching prospective renters to their new pods. Brownstone's concept involves buying single-family homes. Boo! Single-family homes are racist. Everyone knows that. Usually with 2 or 3 bedrooms. They then build sleeping quarters, which generally consist of a cubicle-style arrangement that can sleep over a dozen people. The company's website advertises a fully equipped area with shelves, electrical outlets, and places to hang clothes. Ooh, luxury. That's what they call luxury. They also build a sleeping arrangement as 40% more space than bunk beds and infinitely more private. The latter referring to the fact that the opening of the sleeping area has a curtain. ABC 7 of San Francisco recently dove into this phenomenon. Their segment showed a 3-bedroom house that was filled with 14 pods. The house has the amenities that a typical 3-bedroom house would be expected to have, but is shared by 14 residents. Okay. You will own nothing. You will have no privacy. You will live in a pod. You will eat the bugs. And you will be happy. This is from Emerald Robinson at her Substack, which I highly recommend. Pfizer's new 80,000 page data dump is a nightmare. Pfizer tested their COVID vaccine on rats and then let pregnant women take it. You probably didn't know that Pfizer dumped 80,000 pages of documents this week. That's because the American corporate media refused to cover it. And that's because almost all of them took money from the Biden regime to promote the experimental vaccines and kill any critical coverage of them. Anyway, it turns out that Pfizer's COVID vaccine was not 95% effective. The data shows it has a 12% efficacy rate. Let me repeat, 12%. That's 1 followed by a 2. But wait, it gets worse. There were no human clinical trials to determine if the experimental COVID vaccines were safe for pregnant women. They were excluded from all the trials. None, zero, zilch, nada. Instead, they tested it on 44 rats. Pfizer deliberately cut off the clinical data trial before the bad news could be collected. We already know that Pfizer's vaccines are RNA is reverse transcribing itself into your DNA. We already know that the vaccines increase the risk of getting COVID in children. The CDC intentionally withheld clinical data from the public, and a Moderna gene sequence pattern in 2017 was found in the COVID virus spike protein. Pregnant women in the U.S. military who were coerced into taking the jab have suffered horrific side effects and so-called congenital malformations in their babies. There were more than 18,900 babies born with such abnormalities in 2021. We know this because a few brave whistleblowers got their hands on the Department of Defense's medical database. More than 18,900 babies. Just think about that. There is much more news to come out about the COVID vaccines, and all of it is bad. I suppose there's a limit to what I can say on this subject. But no, I don't have time to talk about it, but I recommend Scott Locklin, Locklin, and his WordPress, where he's been writing things the establishment got wrong about the Wuhan coup, and he's now done a part 2. Again, highly recommended. And let's, yes, I made an error. Well, I make lots of errors on this live stream, but I made an error talking about Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, about Mexican religious cults. And what I did is that I conflated Jesus Malverde with Santa Muerte. Jesus, according to Wikipedia, Jesus Malverde, or the bad green Jesus, is known as the angel of the poor, or the narco saint, is a folklore hero in the Mexican state of Sinaloa. He is a Robin Hood figure who is supposed to have stolen from the rich to give to the poor. And of course, this is associated with skulls, because why not? You know that, you know the bit, the skulls on the badges? Mark and Jez, their show. Are we the baddies? Yeah, generally, if you wear skulls, that makes you a baddie. According to Wiki, Santa Muerte is a cult image, a female deity and folk saint in folk Catholicism and Mexican neo-paganism. A personification of death, she is associated with healing, protection, and safe delivery to the afterlife by her devotees. Despite condemnation by leaders of the Catholic Church and more recently evangelical movements, her following has become increasingly prominent since the turn of the 21st century. Originally appearing as a male figure, Santa Muerte now generally appears as a skeletal female figure clad in a long robe and holding one or more objects, usually a scythe and a globe. Oh, yes, and apparently this is feminist. Also, association with the alphabet people community. Santa Muerte is also revered and seen as a saint and protector of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer alphabet people communities in Mexico, since alphabet people are considered and treated as outcasts by the Catholic Church, evangelical churches, and Mexican society at large. Yes, so associate yourself with a death cult. That is really going to, raise your reputation. Make people like you, trust you. No, there was no reason to be frightened. These people, no phobia for us. They're only a satanic death cult. I wanted to talk about the, let's go to the chat, and then I'm going to talk about the first 4 episodes of Better Call Saul, Season 6. Earl Pipe says, is this executive class's way of telling us they view us as rodents or vermin? Hello to Professor Paul. Как вы поживаете? The Bible talks about people who love death, says David the Gnome. Well, specifically the New Testament. When the Assistant Secretary of Health is a man in a dress and a wig, you'd best not take any experimental vaccines, says David the Gnome. Man, live in your box. Says Chogakin 666. This is all connected. That, you don't want to buy DVDs. You don't want to buy Blu-rays. You don't want to buy CDs. Well, why? And Steve Jobs was into this in the beginning. No Blu-ray support for Apple products, right? Why? Softening us up. Let's just keep buying things over and over again, the same things from the Apple Store, right? Just stream everything. Keep paying every month to watch the same episodes of The Office. By the way, Netflix was apparently critically injured when they lost the rights to The Office. I think the Peacock channel has that now. You can buy all the seasons of The Office on DVD for something like 50 or 60 bucks. But you see, one of the problems with physical media, CDs, Blu-rays, DVDs, books for that matter, is they require space for housing. So, you can't live in a pod if you own your own media. You can't. It can't be done. So let's get people to believe that owning physical things is for suckers, and then we can start putting them in pods. Do the pods come with a few months' supply of bugs? Asked Dan. Earl Pipe says, Pete Davidson, the only man beta enough for a Hillary tattoo. Yeah, Kanye's from Chicago, says Earl Pipe. The Kavorka. Yes, today's obligatory Seinfeld reference. I was from Yo Mama. Kiwi Farm's not nearly as fun as Encyclopedia Dramatica. Well, I mean, as far as I remember, Encyclopedia Dramatica, does that still exist? That it was one woman's effort instead of Kiwi Farms is the efforts of thousands of people. It's not a narrative in this. There's not narratives in the same way that Encyclopedia Dramatica was. Earl Pipe says, Biden and Bailey's World War III ring circus. Get your tickets. Thank you for your kind words, Jokin 666. I'm not going to repeat Popcasso 88's joke about the Kardashians. How did Travis Barker fall in with this clan? Asked Yoma. I think that a pimp mama, as they call her, decided that my children, their own, my daughter, well, my son too, they have to be with black people exclusively, and maybe that brand is getting a little tired. So we're going to start letting white people be polluted in all manner of ways by the Kardashians. I think that's what happened. I really do. Okay, so we're into season 6 of Better Call Saul, which is the last season, which is going to have 13 and not 10 episodes. And I found myself, we're through 4 episodes now, like Millhouse. When are they going to get to the fireworks factory? Only it's not the fireworks factory in this case. It's Omaha. Okay, because Omaha is, well, in the present, or, much further along in time. But we're still in Albuquerque, New Mexico, before the events in Breaking Bad. And I have noticed some fan service. Wendy, we get to see Wendy the prostitute again. That opening montage of her with the customers in the motel, that song by the Association, Wendy, a huge hit in 1966, was one of my very favorite songs. That was tremendous. And the Kettlemans are back. And I have to say that Betsy Kettleman, despite the fact that she is a terrible person, she is grasping and stupid on top of it. Very attractive woman. How did they get together? I suspect that Craig Kettleman, a rather meek individual, thought that his choices in women sexually were rather limited, and I suspect that this woman threw herself at him, thinking, he's involved with money. He works with money for a living, government money. Boy, I'd sure like some of that government money. There's an awful lot of government money, and in fact, as we know, he stole like $1.6 million and bribed Jimmy McGill. And this was big trouble for Jimmy. But in any event, it was Craig who ended up in jail. So they're back. They don't really advance the plot at all. And the plot is that Kim Wexler is determined to destroy Howard Hamlin. And Kim Wexler has become the real villain of this piece. Now, we had some what is irritatingly called backstory or just history about this, that apparently Kim Wexler had a lousy family life growing up. Well, once again, get in the queue. Well, she certainly triumphed over this, but she is a nasty person, vengeful person. She's certainly ungrateful, and she's determined to destroy Howard Hamlin for reasons that are a little obscure. Howard was mean to her when she stuck up for Jimmy before he became Saul Goodman, and then he later apologized and explained to her, "It's not me. I like Jimmy. I've always liked Jimmy. I would like to hire him, but it was Chuck, the brother, the son of the founder of the firm. Sorry, he's not the son of the founder, but he was the greatest, leading light American legal mind in the American Southwest, and so he was having none of it." And there was the other fellow that we had, Schweikert. Was that his name? This fellow was only good to Kim Wexler, and she was horrible to him. Well, first of all, not doing her job, and also deciding to create a scene with him in front of his office, which was all entirely phony, which was intended to make him look like a terrible man, which he is not. This woman is clearly self-destructive. The question is, how many people is she going to bring down with her? Now, a fair amount of reality as far as legal things go in this show. Well, the one exception. Saul Goodman is what they call in the legal profession a sole practitioner. He doesn't have any, partners. Well, I was a legal clerk for a sole practitioner for 2 years. Sole practitioners cannot have that many active clients because there's only so much one man can do in a day. And every time we, saw or see Saul Goodman's office, it's full of like 24 people. I'm sorry, that's not going to work. It's simply not going to work. Another, that of course Kim Wexler and Jimmy McGill, Saul Goodman, they're married now, and if you recall the day that they got married, Huel Babineau was a witness, and you saw him sadly shaking his head. Huel wasn't digging it. Huel is supposed to be this, this stupid man mountain. Actually, it turns out he's not all that stupid, and he was certainly right about the wedding. This couple doesn't seem to like each other very much. They don't seem very close emotionally or sexually. We see that Jimmy McGill, he seems to have this like dog-like attachment to people who are smarter or more powerful than him, with his brother and now Kim Wexler. And she is leading him down a very, very dark path. Oh, yes, I was going to say about Kim Wexler. Oh, she wants to do pro bono work for all the innocent people screwed by the justice system, the poor, the minorities, hard-working Hispanics who are holding down 2 jobs, and, it's their rich friends who, stop. Just stop. The most famous criminal attorney in America, Alan Dershowitz. I remember reading an interview with him where he said 99% of those who are charged with a crime are guilty. The Anglo-American system of law is a game. I don't mean that, in a defamatory sense. And lawyers, it is their job to give the best possible legal representation to their clients. If they're guilty, well, that's the way it goes. If they're innocent, even better. But no, apparently there's this vast pool of people who are going to go to prison when they haven't committed a crime. Yeah, okay, sure. And Kim Wexler is increasingly shaking her fist at the Howard Hamlins of the world. Well, in the original setup that Kim had, she was allowed to do this pro bono work so long as she did the important work for the company, and she decided to just blow that off, to shine that on, or whatever phrase you want to use, because she is she's a narcissist. And she is a solipsist. There doesn't seem to be much of a world outside of her consciousness, except for her dubious connection with these so-called innocent people. Let's talk about Mike Ehrmantraut. I've never liked this character. Oh, he's seen it all. Oh, he's worldly wise. And there's not so much of a difference between criminals and cops as you might think. Really now. Okay. He's like it's like, a Melville film, a Jean-Pierre Melville film. But Mike Ehrmantraut thinks that this is real. This code of honor amongst thieves. No, there is no code of honor amongst thieves. It just doesn't exist. It works in the movies because we all know it's a cliche or trope or a myth or whatever you want to call it, but it doesn't work in real life. Lalo Salamanca, Tony Dalton. I continue to be impressed by this fellow. He has real star quality. He's an exceedingly nasty man, but he has that great mischievous smile, very strong personality. Great villain, I must say. So, I guess we're going to see, more fan service. We're going to see, I guess we're going to see Walter White and Jesse Pinkman. I don't really know what point this show is trying to make. I mean, Kim Wexler's becoming a supervillain, I suppose, is kind of a surprise. I mean, she's a good actress. She makes quite an impression on the screen. Jimmy McGill is a fun-loving guy, and Kim Wexler is not a fun-loving woman, except if it involves cheating people and screwing others over. And she's crushing his spirit. That I suppose we know the kind of person that Saul Goodman was in Breaking Bad, and I suppose we're supposed to make the connection that it was Kim Wexler who finally eliminated the last of decency or humanity from him. It's pretty funny. The opening scene of episode 1, where we see, I don't know, people acting for the police or for the government, removing everything of value from Saul Goodman's palatial estate in Albuquerque, and just such horrible, bad taste. There's always references to famous movies in Better Call Saul. I particularly like the one in episode 1 where there is a life-size cutout of Saul Goodman, and we see it floating in a pool, bringing to mind, of course, the beginning of Billy Wilder's classic Sunset Boulevard. I'm not going to go into the Nacho Vargo stuff too much because, frankly, I was never all that interested in that side of it. Sorry. I know that there are people out there standing for him, but I never really felt it, Oh, he's a gangster, but he loves his father and he's trying to get out. And, he got fake ID for the province of Manitoba in Canada for himself and his father. I suppose there's always a problem of how much loot that you're going to take with you. But if you really want to get out, and if you're really worried that you're not going to be let out because they're going to kill your father, well, take those 2 fake IDs and get on the first Southwest plane out of town. Anyway, those are my thoughts on season 6 of Better Call Saul. Gamian says, I like Kim. Don't understand why she's becoming more like Saul. I guess she had it in her all along. I see Gus Fring as an anti-hero, says Brian Frakes. Gamian says, I really dislike Mike, especially after he killed that German man and then betrayed Nacho. I tell you why I dislike Mike. It's not just the phony, code of honor stuff. It's like his refusal to give Walter White his due. Just because you robbed a train doesn't make you Jesse James. Yes, it does make you Jesse James. And, spoiler alert, the reason he died, the reason why Walt shot him to death is because he just wouldn't shut up with the insults. I mean, was he jealous? Was he jealous of Walter White? I like Walt. Jesse annoyed me, says Gamion. I wasn't a big fan of Nacho, but the episode with him on the run was gripping, says Paul Casawady. Yes, it was quite exciting. Yes, it was a very resourceful young man, and a very innovative use of an abandoned train oil car. Not giving too much away, I hope. Paul Casawady enjoyed the fan service. They all cry for their mothers. It's poignant, says Jogakin 666. Okay. That's a good take on the space issue of non-physical media, says Divot the Gnome. Well, I collected books for most of my life, and at one time I was a serious book collector. I had 1,500 hardcover books. I had a fair number of signed first editions, and I've said this before, but you can own books and stay put. Because if you move, particularly if you move, a few times, you can't do it. You can't do it. Books are so heavy, so dense. They take up so much space, particularly hardcovers, that the expense of moving them and the physical expense, if you're moving them yourself, is crippling. True Greenbird says, I thought it was funny that they brought in the Nazis as the bad kind of white drug dealer. Same thing happens on Sons of Anarchy. I never really got that. These, the Nazis, the prison Nazis that Walter gets involved in, I just think this was situational. These people become neo-Nazis in prison in order to protect themselves from the blacks and the Mexicans and such like, the Hispanics. I don't really think there's much ideological commitment there. That's a shame. What a cool library, says David the Gnome. Yes, and when I think about what my Martin Amis first editions were worth, I have a little private cry. Moving boxes of books is not light work, though, says David the Gnome. No, indeed, it is not. And of course, when you see, if you were to move them properly, if you were to ship them the way that someone, in the book business would do, you would wrap every single book in paper. Do you know how many hundreds of hours that would take when you have like 2,000 books, And of course, books come in all different size. One of the reasons, one of the delights, say, in comparison of CDs, Blu-rays, and DVDs, with few exceptions, they're of uniform size, which means, oh, yes, let's fill up a box. And it's easy. Filling up a box full of books, we're going to have to sort the books by size. And of course, the size in many cases is approximate, but I don't want to bore you anymore with my moving woes. Jonathan Paul says, my new book is a light paperback. You should buy it. Well, I will get your book. Mercurius Alicus says, I just had to get rid of 3/4 of my books when I moved. I sympathize. Well, here's the thing. This is my last word, okay? When you start culling books, you're going down a slippery slope. I apologize for the mixed metaphor. Do I really need this? Do I really want this? And then this brings this existential question. Do I really need any of this? And again, you don't want to go down that slope. People like to own things. There's some people who like owning things too much. But as I like to say that, even serfs had a few treasured possessions, but now we're informed once again that personal possessions are for suckers and fools, that everything valuable in life, you can look into your screen and there it is. It's a great life skill to be able to part with possessions. Oberlin Waugh told this story that he had been a great collector of things, curios and such, also all sorts of things for decades. And then when his mother finally died, who was Evelyn Waugh's widow, Evelyn Waugh had collected stuff from all over the world, all this stuff from Abyssinia and all the places he traveled, which was pretty much the whole world, all rare pictures and all this sort of thing. And so there was this, windfall for Auburn Waugh. And then he decided, I'm just not interested anymore. A surfeit of riches, as they say. Professor Pohl's book is called The Years of Great Silence, the Deportation, Special Settlement, and Mobilization into the Labor Army of Ethnic Germans in the USSR, 1941 to 1955. Your mama says, I just want objets d'art. Damn it. There's always storage units. Yes, I have a storage unit in which my belongings, almost all of them, have been there for now 2 years. And again, I have all these DVDs and Blu-rays. Do I? Do I have them when they're in a storage unit? There's more commitment to the aesthetics than principles for prison Nazis, says Earl Pipe. Yes, I'm sure that is true. In any event, this is it for today. I shall be back on the air next Monday, and I'm going to commit to that at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Music Monday, the book club, Theater Thursday, and the book club will be back. We'll be back next week. And I thank you all for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it, as always. If you'd like to make a donation to the live stream, my PayPal account is linked to kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you're in Canada, donations may be made to the live stream directly via interact@kevingrace@shaw.ca. As always, I leave you with this benediction in these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse. I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.